Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to discuss what type of CPU cooler you need and what will fit your situation the best. So before we start discussing things, just down below hit the subscribe button and also the bell icon to stay tuned for future videos, and also like the video if you find something useful. And there's always the comments where you can say how stupid my hair looks or what your thoughts are on the subject. Alright, to start off we have our basic, just our stock cooler. Now this is actually an AMD cooler, and this came with the new these coolers come with the new Ryzen CPUs. One thing about stock coolers is if they include a stock cooler with your CPU, then that cooler will be definitely enough just to cool your CPU. You won't get necessarily the best performance or the best temperatures, but it will cool your CPU, and it's a very good start if you don't have anything other than that. You also won't be able to overclock your CPU as much. With this cooler I was able to overclock my CPU just by a little bit, but then the temperatures really was above the level of comfort for me. Alright, the next thing you would maybe want to look into is, beyond the stock cooler, is just an aftermarket air cooler. Now with the aftermarket air coolers, this is really the safest bet I would recommend, because there is literally no points of failure. Oh, there's only the fan, so there's actually one point of failure. And if the fan, even if the fan dies while you're gaming or while you're in an intensive CPU load, then it will definitely affect your performance. But because of the way that heatsink works, is it will still dissipate the heat, and your case fans will still move air through it, so that will also dissipate heat into the air. Aftermarket air coolers also come in a variety of sizes and shapes and all of that, so you can all the way get from really low profile aftermarket coolers for like your ITX builds and such, where you have really small cases, and then you get to like dual tower, like really massive heatsinks, and those can cool literally like any CPU, even Threadripper CPUs, like those big CPUs that pull upwards of 250 watts. It can also cool that CPUs. Alright, the next thing we're going to talk about is AIO. So an AIO is basically an all-in-one, and that is basically where you have a CPU block, and normally the pump is integrated into the CPU block, and then just some tubes to a radiator. Now this is the thing we have to be careful, because a lot of other tech channels has already proven that even like the best AIOs cannot outperform a really good air cooler. And an air cooler definitely is cheaper than an AIO, and an AIO has more failure points. So you have basically the tubes and the radiator, which can get a puncture and your fluid can leak out. That can be really bad, especially for all the other components in your computer. Then as well you have the pump, and if that fails, it doesn't move around the liquid inside, and that will also cause big troubles, because then no heat is taken away from the CPU. And then you also have the fan, so there's much more points of failure. Oh, your liquid can also inside can clog up. I know there's one cooler in particular. I know Steve from Gamers Nexus he did like a few videos on it, where one particular AIO would just completely clog up the fins and literally like stop working within a month or two from literally buying a brand new unit. So the only reason why I would recommend an AIO above an air cooler is if you're traveling a lot, because literally an air cooler is all this weight basically that is hanging from your motherboard. So especially if you have a big cooler, so with all of that weight, and during shipping and you're moving it around, it will shake a lot, so that can actually cause literally your motherboard to break, like physically break apart. Now this isn't very common, as all of the coolers have good retention systems and a plate that goes on the other side of the motherboard, so it's really secure. But there is always a risk that somewhere in your travels, maybe if it's in your car, you go through over a speed bump or through a pothole, that can happen, and your cooler could actually break your motherboard. So in that case, I would actually recommend going with an AIO, because an AIO, you basically mount the radiator, which is the heaviest part, because that's normally it's aluminum, sometimes copper. with all the liquid in, and the liquid is actually where the most of the weight is, but that is secured to your case. So that is just secured, and that cannot move anywhere, even if you shake it around, like that's solid. And then the other part is just your CPU block that is directly attached to the CPU, obviously, but that is such a small weight, and it only protrudes like a few centimeters at most, so that isn't really enough weight to break your motherboard. So that's really the only reason why I would recommend an AIO, is for if you're traveling a lot, or if maybe if you have a special form factor case that you need an AIO for, then I would recommend an AIO just for that, so that you know your system will be safe when you're traveling a lot. Alright, then the last point is custom cooling. Now, if you absolutely want the quietest build, the lowest temps, the best looks in my opinion, then you need to go custom water cooling. But there's a big but to this. It is the most expensive option. So custom water cooling definitely requires a lot more knowledge and a lot more maintenance as well. So compared to an air cooler and an AIO, an air cooler you just have to sometimes just blow out the dust from the heat sinks, maybe clean off your fan, and it will basically perform at the best it can at all times. An AIO will definitely, after some time, if the liquid, now this is not in all cases, but there is some AIOs that do definitely clog up after time. So then that will also start to decrease your performance after a while, and then you also have to clean out the radiator, because dust, this is actually a very good like dust filter. All the dust and hairs and stuff gets trapped in your radiator, and your fans, depending on where they are, the fans also get clogged up, and that actually does negatively impact your performance just very slightly, but it does, having a lot of dust and debris on your fans. So you would want to clean out that regularly. So coming back to a custom loop has much more, you have to be much more involved with it. You can't just leave your system for years on it and expect everything to be fine. Well, you could technically just leave it for years, but then you have to be really lucky. So let's get into all the things that you have to consider when going with custom loops. Well, the first thing is, it's not just one solution that you buy and you install it and you know everything is there and you're ready to go, except if you go with an EKW kit. So I did a video on how to water cool your PC, if you want to go check out that right here. But to continue talking about custom water cooling, you have to consider that there's a lot more components and a lot more places of failure. So first of all, you have all the different components. So you have your block, you have your pump, your radiator, and your fans. So all of those are potential points of failure. But in addition to that the AIO has, is you have all these fittings and all of these connections. So basically each fitting is 2 points of failure. And why do I say that? Because you have your, let's take the radiator for example, you have your radiator, then you have an actual fitting that you have to secure to the radiator. So that's already one place, 1 point of failure. And then you have your tube connecting to the fitting. So that's 2 points of failure. And in a system, in a minimum system where you have one radiator, a pump, and a CPU block, that is 6 fittings. So that's 12 points of failure that you have just with the tubing and liquid alone. Then you still have to consider other things like the fluid blocking up your fins, gunking up. But this will only happen if you run with certain types of fluids. If you put like, I know some pastel fluids did that. If you put certain types of colorants and additives into your distilled water inside your loop, that can cause clogging over time. So in my system, I'm just using normal distilled water with a clear, just antimicrobial, anti-rust and antioxidation solution. I'm just running that with distilled water in my system, and I've had no clogging up whatsoever, no discoloration of anything, and that is just the way I like it, because then the RGB can decide the color and I'm not stuck with just one color. Alright, so with custom loops, there definitely is, the expandability is literally endless, because you can get blocks for all the higher end CPUs and GPUs. So, and they will always make new blocks for the newer graphics cards and such. So there will always be an upgrade path for you if you go with liquid cooling. And the thing is, it's very much expandable. So you can start off with one radiator, and then let's say after a year you've saved up enough that you can buy a second radiator to increase your performance. Or let's say, yeah, you want to do something else, you want to put in a distro plate, then you can do that for some extra looks and such. So there's definitely the possibilities and the configurations with custom loops is definitely really, there's a lot more than just the standard air cooler and AIO. So what would I recommend you get? Well, if you have a stock cooler included with your CPU, definitely use that just at the beginning. You can use that extra money that you would have bought an aftermarket cooler. You could just spend that somewhere else in your build, maybe some more storage, a better graphics card, better motherboard, or yeah, just any of those things you can spend that extra money on, which will definitely benefit you in the longer run. And then after a few months you have saved up again, then you can buy a better cooler if you need it. If you're someone who is traveling a lot, you have to constantly move your PC around, you have to build it, set it up here, then take it down again, then I would definitely recommend an AIO, just because you know that your system will be safe. There will be no, your components won't break inside, so just give you peace of mind that everything will work. And then lastly, if you have the money and you want that looks and you have the time to do water cooling and the maintenance of it, and you absolutely want the lowest temps with the highest performance and just a quiet system, I would definitely recommend going with a custom water cool loop. It will definitely be the most expensive option, but it will give you the best performance and just the best temperatures and the best everything that you can possibly ask for. Alright guys, that is all for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe and hit the bell icon if you haven't already. And see you again next time guys. I hope you're doing well. Bye bye.